Hi everybody, it's great to be with you today. It's Dr. Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about how social connections and rejection affect health and how to nourish your genes with better relationships. So this video is based on an article that I just recently posted, and I'm going to, of course, provide you with the link either if you're watching this on YouTube or if you are viewing this on my website. I will give you the original link so that you can look at all the research about what I talk about and dive deep into the studies, especially if you want to geek out on genes and epigenetics and all these fancy words that I'm going to talk about. So, social connections, right? We know today that actually our connections to other people and relationships are one of the biggest predictors of our health and our mortality risks with cardiovascular disease. Isolation is actually the #1 risk factor for dying of cardiovascular disease. And most people think if they take care of their physical body, that's all they need to do to stay healthy. And I've been talking for the past several weeks that that's not necessarily true. When we become so obsessed with our physical bodies that we forget about our emotional and our relational experiences in life, our health suffers on a physical level. So this week I talked about rejection, right? We know that relationships are very important. So what happens when we stay in toxic relationships or groups because of fear of rejection? Or what happens if we feel rejected? And that being said, now that we know the effects, how can we find positive, nurturing relationships for optimizing wellness? So what I did in my article is I went through kind of some articles that talk about the biochemistry and biology of social rejection. Basically, rejection triggers stress. Stress triggers inflammation, and inflammation drives disease. They've actually done studies where they've shown a connection between this perceived threat of social rejection and how this modulates our genes, our genetics, right? At the DNA level, it actually causes expression of immune activators. Your body can't tell the difference between a physical stressor and an emotional stressor. It also can't tell the difference between if the stressor is a tiger that's running up behind us and we need to get away, or if it's just a perceived stressor of an emotional impact, like somebody's bullying you or fear of loss of social status. So some of the studies have shown that I reported have shown that there was a correlation between how high somebody was on a social status scale, meaning that the more popular they were, the more genes were impacted because they had more to lose. And this actually affected asthma symptoms in adolescents. There's also been studies that show that social pressure impacts immune activity, and these also correlate to changes in the brain, especially for people who are more sensitive. There's been studies that actually show that social environmental stress is linked to changes that drive depression because of the inflammation in the brain. And this perceived emotional stress, if it's prolonged, can cause other inflammatory issues in the body, which link to other health disease states. And then finally, one of the things about rejection is that it hurts, physically hurts. In our brain, at least. They've done some studies that show that there's a link between where physical pain is processed in the brain, my tongue twister of the video, I always have a tongue twister, and also where social rejection is processed in the brain. So, you know, the headlines where rejection hurts, and it's true. So that being said, we know that the quality of our relationships actually determine health, and they influence our genes, right? That's the concept of sociogenomics that I spoke about in another video about how we have the power to modulate our health beyond our genes, at least how they function to an extent. So we know that they're important. So what do? Well, one of the tools that I offered was allowing yourself to be vulnerable and use some specific tools for building relationships. Now, I linked to another article which provides some of those tools, including, getting feedback about how to be vulnerable and ask for what you need, having the courage to maybe get out of toxic relationships or even see if those relationships are affecting your health. I talked about getting support for dealing with trauma and grief and how that a professional might actually help somebody come up with, some ways to establish these healthy boundaries beyond, say, do-it-yourself articles that you can read. And then I talked about essential oils, one of my favorite topics, right? So there's no surprise there. How can essential oils help us with relationships? On the biochemical level, they actually impact our brain health. At the signaling level, right, they influence our neurotransmitters, so they could calm down those kind of overly anxious thoughts, right? They could soothe the brain to make us make better decisions in our behavior that help break the cycle of those addictive patterns to maybe go back to a relationship that you don't know is healthy for you, or maybe even some behaviors that are fueling unhealthy relationships that are affecting them. They actually alter brainwave patterns at the functional level, and they've done studies that when we smell things, it affects the waves of our brain, the electrical energy of our brain, and calms those down. Of course, the link is in the article that I'm going to give you to the essential oils article summary that shows all the research on this. And finally, remember that these essential oils, regardless of the emotional impact and how they're soothing, right? Aromatherapy for soothing is kind of well accepted now. They also have biochemical responses, and these biochemical responses are physiological as well as biochemical, meaning these little chemicals go into our cells and they do pretty cool things like modulate immune function, help our bodies with oxidative stress, right, so that our cells aren't getting bombarded by all these stressors that impact how it functions, and they do so much more. So I hope that this gives you a perspective on the importance of relationships and making sure that they're a factor when you consider your health. I know the upcoming holidays are coming, and for a lot of people, it means closer times with their loved ones. For some people, it means more stress and toxic relationships. So I wanted to get this out during this time. If you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me. You can comment on the blog. You can comment on the YouTube video. I still post on Facebook quite a lot. And maybe you guys can help each other out with some comments and what you've been through. That would be fantastic. All right, have a great start to your November. This is November 2018 coming at you, and happy end of the year. I'll be back. Take care.